Listen carefully. That voice in your head is not your identity. It comments, it predicts, it warns, it repeats. And you have spent years treating it like a king on a throne, when it is often nothing more than a frightened narrator reading from old scripts. What if that voice is not you? What if it is only noise with good timing? What if anxiety keeps its grip on you for a simple reason? You keep answering every thought as if it came from the highest authority inside you. The truth is, thoughts are not facts. Thoughts are weather. Thoughts are echoes. Thoughts are habits wearing the mask of truth, and once you learn to watch them instead of becoming them, anxiety loses most of its power. Chapter 1. The Voice That Never Sleeps. You already know the feeling. The room is quiet, but your mind is not. Your body is still, but something inside you keeps moving, pacing, circling, whispering danger into ordinary moments. You try to rest, and your thoughts speed up. You try to focus, and your thoughts split in every direction. You try to enjoy a simple hour of peace, and the voice returns with another warning, another memory, another prediction, another reason to stay on edge. That is the trap. It does not need chains, it only needs your attention. Most of your suffering does not come from the world in front of you. It comes from the running commentary inside you, the constant narrator, the voice that talks over your life as if it owns it. It says you are behind. It says something bad is coming. It says you should have handled that better. It says you are not safe yet. It says think harder. It says check again. It says do not relax. Stop for a second. Listen to the pattern. How much of your day is spent obeying a voice you never chose? The truth is, anxiety survives by making you feel fused to your thoughts, not influenced by them, not affected by them, fused to them, as if every sentence your mind produces must mean something important, as if every fear deserves investigation, as if every inner alarm is proof of real danger. This is where most people stop. They never question the authority of the voice. They only argue with it, obey it, fear it, or try to silence it by force. But the more they wrestle with it, the stronger it feels, because struggle can look a lot like surrender when the mind is clever enough. A thought appears, what if you fail? Another appears, what if you embarrass yourself? Another appears, what if this anxiety never leaves? And because those thoughts arrive with emotional weight, you mistake weight for truth. You feel fear, so you assume there must be danger. You feel tension, so you assume there must be a problem to solve. But a feeling is not a verdict. A thought is not a command. Sit with that. Do not rush past it. That sentence alone can change the architecture of your inner life. Your mind produces thoughts the way lungs draw breath, constantly, automatically, without asking your permission. Some thoughts are useful, some are protective. Some are absurd, some are stale, some are cruel, some are just leftovers from old pain. But you treat them as if they all came from the same sacred source. They do not. You can think about being trapped and still be free. You can think about failure and still act with strength. You can think about fear and still move with control. The thought is not the event. The thought is only the thought. That sounds simple. It is not easy, because you have practiced the opposite for years. You have practiced collapsing into every thought that arrives. You have practiced treating inner noise like prophecy. You have practiced calling mental chaos your personality. After enough repetition, you stop noticing the separation between the observer and the noise. You only feel the storm. Stop again. Think about your hardest days. Were you suffering from life itself, or from the story your mind told about life? This matters because anxiety does not need to prove anything. It only needs to speak first. It only needs to be loud. It only needs to create urgency. Once urgency enters the room, discipline leaves through the back door. You start reacting. You start checking. You start replaying. You start explaining yourself to your own mind as if it were a hostile judge you need to impress, and still it is never enough. Because the anxious mind does not want resolution. It wants occupation. It wants your energy. It wants another hour of your focus. It wants you trapped in mental labor that produces nothing except more exhaustion. That is why you can spend half a day thinking and finish with less clarity than you had at the start. The truth is, the voice in your head is often less like a guide and more like static. Familiar static, intelligent-sounding static, emotional static. And because it uses your language, your memories, your fears, and your tone, you assume it must be you. But a narrator is not the main character. Commentary is not identity. That realization can feel strange at first. If the voice is not fully you, then who is hearing it? Who notices the panic? Who recognizes the spiral? Who sees the thought arrive? There is something in you that can witness the mind, calmly, quietly, without becoming every sentence that passes through. That part of you has been there the whole time. Be still for a moment. You have heard the voice, but you have also heard yourself hearing the voice. There is a difference, and that difference is power. Real freedom begins the moment you stop asking how to control every thought and start asking how to stop kneeling before them. Because control does not mean forcing silence. Control means refusing to treat noise like truth. It means seeing a thought clearly, naming it for what it is, and denying it the right to run your life. You do not need a perfect mind. You need a stronger relationship to the mind you have. That is a very different task. And it is the first honest task. Your anxiety has trained you to live as if inner noise deserves instant obedience. But what if it deserves observation instead? What if your mind could shout and you did not have to move? What if fear could speak and you did not have to sign your name to every sentence it wrote? What if the first act of mental strength is not winning the argument, but stepping out of it? That is where silence starts. Not outside you, inside your response. And once you see that, you cannot go back to sleep inside the noise. Chapter 2. The Thought Trap. The moment you begin to question the voice, something uncomfortable happens. You start noticing how often it speaks, not once or twice a day, not only during a crisis, constantly. It comments on your face, your future, your worth, your safety, your past, your next move, your smallest mistake, your unfinished work, your unread message, your silence, your tone, your body, your sleep. It has an opinion about everything, and most of that opinion carries tension. That is not wisdom. That is overreach. The trap is not that you have anxious thoughts. The trap is that you keep entering into conversations with them as if they deserve a central place in your life. A thought appears, and you chase it. Then another appears, and you chase that too. Before long, your whole day has been stolen by sentences that never ask permission to enter. This is how people lose years without realizing it. Not through dramatic collapse, through constant mental interruption, through tiny moments of surrender, repeated so often they become a lifestyle. Think about how many times you have paused your life to deal with a thought. How many times has the thought actually solved anything? The anxious mind works like a trap by disguising rumination as responsibility. It tells you that if you keep thinking, you are staying prepared. If you keep replaying, you are being careful. If you keep doubting, you are being realistic. If you keep scanning for danger, you are staying safe. But what does that habit produce? Fatigue, hesitation, self-distrust, a body that never fully comes down from alarm. A mind so busy trying to avoid pain that it creates pain in advance and lives in it before anything even happens. The truth is, most anxious thinking is not problem-solving. It is self-persecution with a noble voice. It feels active, so you call it useful. It feels intense, so you call it important. But intensity is not intelligence. Speed is not clarity. Repetition is not evidence. This is where most people stop. They keep searching for the perfect answer to shut anxiety up. But anxiety can survive any answer because its real fuel is not uncertainty. Its real fuel is your willingness to keep feeding it attention. A thought says, "What if you say the wrong thing?" Then you rehearse, then you edit, then you monitor your own tone. Then you leave the conversation, only to replay it for an hour. The mind says, "See, this is serious. Look how much work you had to do." But the work came from the thought itself. The trap created the labor, then used the labor as proof that the trap was necessary. Look at that clearly. That is not protection. That is a closed loop. And closed loops feel endless because they feed themselves. The mind can also trap you with identity. It does not only say, "But this could also go wrong." It says, "This is who you are. You are overthinking because you are anxious. You are pulling back because you are weak. You are checking because you have to. You are always going to be like this." Those are not observations. Those are mental handcuffs. Once a thought becomes identity, resistance gets harder. You stop saying, "I am having a fearful thought." You start saying, "I am a fearful person." That small shift changes everything. It fuses the passing state to the permanent self. It turns a moment into a sentence. It turns weather into climate. How much of your pain comes from a thought, and how much comes from what you call yourself after the thought appears? You have to see the mechanics of this, or you will keep mistaking the prison for your personality. Anxious thoughts are quick. Your attachment to them is even quicker. That attachment happens in silence, so fast you barely notice it. A thought appears. You tense, you agree, you prepare, you obey. This all happens before conscious choice enters the room. That is why discipline matters, not discipline as hardness for show. Discipline as the ability to create a pause between thought and action, a pause long enough to see what is happening, a pause long enough to say, "There is the voice again, there is the old script, the same threat is dressed in a new sentence." That pause is not weakness, it is power. The truth is, every anxious spiral is built from small, unquestioned permissions. Permission to keep checking, permission to keep replaying, permission to keep assuming, permission to keep treating discomfort like an emergency. Anxiety grows when your mind learns that every fearful signal will be honored instantly. So you must retrain it. Not by fighting every thought. That becomes another trap. Not by forcing positivity. That turns into performance. Not by pretending calm when you are not calm. That only buries the pressure. You retrain the mind by changing your posture toward the thought. You see it, you name it, you let it exist without giving it control. That sounds almost too simple, but simple is not shallow. Fire burns because oxygen keeps meeting flame. Remove the oxygen and the flame weakens. Anxious thought loops burn because attention keeps meeting fear. Remove the automatic attention and the loop loses force. Be honest for a moment. Your mind has trained you well. Now it is time to train it back. You do not owe every thought a trial. You do not owe every fear a response. You do not owe every prediction a strategy. Some thoughts deserve nothing more than recognition and distance, nothing more than a quiet sentence inside you that says, "I hear you, but I do not follow you." That sentence is not dramatic. It is clean. It is mature. It is the beginning of inner order. Because once you stop entering every thought trap, you start seeing the machinery behind the trap itself. And once you see the machinery, you stop calling it fate. Then a deeper question appears. If your mind can trap you this easily, what old patterns has it been using against you all along? Chapter 3. Anxiety's Favorite Lie. Once you start stepping back from your thoughts, you begin to notice something darker than noise. You notice deception. Not because your mind is evil, because it is efficient. It uses the fastest lie that keeps you engaged. It does not need elegance. It only needs results. And anxiety has a favorite lie. It tells you that more thought will bring more control. That is the bait. You feel uncertain, so you think harder. You feel exposed, so you analyze longer. You feel afraid, so you search for the perfect mental angle to eliminate all risk. You call that caution. You call that preparation. You call that responsibility. But if it actually worked, you would have peace by now. Instead, you have exhaustion. Stop for a second. How many hours have you spent trying to think your way out of fear? And how often did that effort create more fear? The truth is, anxious thinking feeds on the promise of mastery. It whispers, "Stay with me a little longer, and you will finally feel safe." Just replay that conversation again. Just rehearse the future again. Just inspect your motives again. Just review the signs again. Just find the hidden meaning again. Safety is right around the corner, but the corner keeps moving. That is the lie. Control is always presented as the reward, but the real outcome is deeper attachment to uncertainty. Because the mind keeps teaching you that relief only comes after more mental labor. So you keep laboring, not because the work is helpful, because you have been conditioned to confuse work with safety. This is where most people stop. They do not challenge the contract. They keep signing it. They give the mind another hour, another night, another year. They think they are earning peace. They are only strengthening the habit that steals it. Look at the structure of the lie. Anxiety says, if you keep thinking, you can prevent pain. But pain is part of life. Embarrassment, loss, misunderstanding, delay, rejection, uncertainty. These are not glitches in the system. They are the cost of being alive. The anxious mind tries to create a version of life where nothing can touch you if you prepare hard enough. That version does not exist. So what happens? You prepare for a fantasy and miss your actual life. Let that land. You are not only afraid of pain, you are afraid of not being able to control pain before it arrives. That fear creates a strange addiction, not to suffering itself, but to mental effort. You get hooked on trying to solve the unsolvable. You get pulled into impossible questions. What if this goes wrong? What if they think less of you? What if you never feel normal again? What if this thought means something terrible? The mind makes these questions feel urgent, but they do not have satisfying answers. They only have more branches, and you follow them because certainty feels sacred when anxiety is loud. But certainty is not always available. Discipline is. That is the turn most people miss. If you cannot have certainty, you need another source of stability. That source is not prediction, it is posture. It is the way you stand inside uncertainty. It is your ability to remain grounded while the mind throws possibilities like stones at a window. The truth is, you do not need to know everything that will happen. You need to know who you will be when it does. That is real control. Not the control of outcomes, the control of response, the control of breath, focus, action, restraint. The control of refusing to hand your life over to unproven narratives. Stop again. Right now, what are you chasing in your head that cannot actually be solved by more thinking? Name it. See how long you have been bargaining with a lie. Anxiety also lies by acting like fear is foresight. It says that if you feel dread, you may be sensing something real. If your stomach tightens, maybe danger is near. If your thoughts get dark, maybe you should listen carefully. Sometimes fear does signal real risk, but often it is just memory wearing present tense. Old pain showing up early and demanding authority, not because it knows the future, because it remembers the past. And if you have suffered before, the mind becomes eager to protect you by overreading every signal. A delayed reply becomes rejection. A strange sensation becomes disaster. A small mistake becomes proof of deep failure. Anxiety is not just pessimistic. It is impatient. It does not wait for evidence. It writes the ending first. That is why you must slow it down, not by yelling at it, not by begging it to stop, by refusing its favorite lie. More thought does not always mean more truth. More rehearsal does not mean more safety. More mental noise does not mean more power. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is leave a thought unanswered. That feels dangerous at first, because you have trained yourself to respond instantly. But with practice, that silence becomes clean. Then it becomes natural. Then it becomes freedom. You start to see anxious thoughts for what they are, not prophecies, invitations, and you do not have to accept every invitation. You do not have to sit down at every table your mind sets for you. Some tables are built to keep you hungry, so learn to walk past them. That is not avoidance. Avoidance is running from life. This is different. This is refusing a false task, refusing to spend your energy on mental rituals that never gave you what they promised, refusing to keep paying for the same lie with your peace. And when that lie loses its shine, another uncomfortable truth appears. Some of your suffering does not come from fear alone. It comes from how attached you have become to the noise itself. Chapter 4. The Addiction to Mental Noise. There comes a point when you have to admit something most people never say out loud. Anxiety is painful, but it can also become familiar, and anything familiar can become seductive, even when it hurts you. Mental noise can start to feel like company. It can start to feel like vigilance. It can start to feel like purpose. You wake up, and the mind is already moving, reviewing, predicting, measuring, monitoring. Part of you hates it. Another part of you trusts it, simply because it is there. That is the danger of repetition. It turns chaos into routine. Then routine starts to look normal. If your mind suddenly went silent for a full hour, would you feel peace or would you feel exposed? That question matters. The truth is, some people do not only fear their thoughts, they fear the emptiness that appears when thoughts lose control. Because without constant commentary, there is no distraction from what is underneath. There is no familiar struggle. There is no constant task. Just space, just stillness, just the raw fact of being alive without a script running every second. And stillness can feel frightening when you have spent years equating tension with safety. This is where most people stop. They say they want peace, but only the kind that still feels busy. They want relief without surrender. They want a quiet mind that still keeps watch for danger. They want stillness that never asks them to release control. That is not stillness. That is negotiated anxiety. Mental noise also gives you a strange illusion of importance. If you are always thinking intensely, it can feel like you are taking life seriously. If you are always monitoring yourself, it can feel like you are being responsible. If you are always internally occupied, it can feel like you are doing something meaningful. But much of that activity is empty motion. A mind in constant motion is not always a mind in command. Let that sit. Noise can feel productive, even when it drains you dry. That is why you must become brutally honest about the rewards anxiety has been giving you. Not the healthy rewards, the hidden rewards, the false comfort of feeling prepared, the identity of being the careful person, the excuse to delay action until you feel certain, the familiar intensity that saves you from facing silence, the private drama that makes ordinary life feel charged with meaning. You may not like hearing that. Good. Some truths should sting before they set you free, because if you secretly depend on mental noise, you will keep recreating it. Even when the situation is calm, the mind will search for something to hold on to. It will invent tension when none is present. It will turn neutral moments into suspicious moments. It will turn boredom into restlessness, restlessness into scanning, scanning into threat, threat into spiral. And then you will say, "See, I knew something was wrong, but the mind wrote the script first." How often do you confuse familiar tension with real danger? How often do you trust a habit simply because it has been with you a long time? There is another harsh truth here. Some people use anxious thinking to avoid direct living. Thinking feels safer than acting. Reviewing feels safer than speaking. Predicting feels safer than participating. In the mind, you can rehearse without risk. In real life, you have to accept impact. You can be seen, you can fail, you can be misunderstood. So the mind offers a compromise. Stay in here with me. Stay in thought. Stay in preparation. Stay in private fear. At least here, nothing final happens. But while nothing final happens, nothing real grows either. Your life can shrink while your mind stays busy enough to hide the loss. That is why this work requires discipline, not mood. If you wait until you feel ready to detach from anxious thought, you will wait forever. The mind will always present another reason to stay engaged, another unfinished concern, another loose thread, another possibility, another warning. Discipline is the choice to step back before comfort arrives. Discipline is saying no to the habit even when it still feels familiar. The truth is, silence will feel unnatural before it feels powerful. Space will feel empty before it feels clean. A less reactive mind will feel strange before it feels strong. That does not mean you are losing something valuable. It means you are withdrawing from dependence. And withdrawal often feels worse before it feels better. So expect resistance. Expect the mind to get louder when you stop feeding it. Expect old thoughts to return and demand attention. Expect fear to say this new distance is dangerous. That does not mean you should turn back. It means the noise has noticed you are leaving. Good. Let it notice. You are not here to negotiate with the habit anymore. You are here to outgrow it. That starts with seeing that mental noise is not depth. It is not intelligence. It is not duty. It is not identity. It is often just repetition with a dramatic tone. Once you strip away the urgency, much of it loses its force. Then you can ask the question that actually matters. If you are not the noise, if you do not need the noise, if you can survive without following the noise, then who are you when it speaks and you remain still? That question changes everything, and it leads you into the private courtroom where so much of your suffering has been judged. Chapter 5. The Inner Courtroom. By now you can see the voice more clearly, but seeing it is not the end, because the voice does not only warn, it accuses, it cross-examines, it builds a case against you with fragments of memory, imagined futures, half-facts, old shame, and selective evidence. It turns your mind into a courtroom where you are always on trial. That courtroom is exhausting because the rules are rigged. The prosecutor never sleeps. The evidence is emotional. The judge changes standards without warning. The sentence is already prepared. Guilt, doubt, tension, self-suspicion. And the worst part is this. You keep showing up to defend yourself. Stop for a second. How much of your inner life is spent trying to prove your worth to a voice that never intends to acquit you? The truth is, anxious thinking often takes the shape of self-interrogation. Did you say too much? Did you say too little? Did you miss something? Did you offend someone? Did that look on their face mean something? Did that body sensation signal danger? Did that mistake reveal your real weakness? The questions come fast. They sound serious. They feel important, but they do not seek truth. They seek continued trial. This is where most people stop. They assume the answer is to improve their defense, better arguments, better self-talk, better explanations, better logic, better reassurances. But in a rigged courtroom, strong defense only proves that the case can continue. You have to stop volunteering for every hearing, because not every accusation deserves a response. The mind says, you are failing, must be true. Look how tense you feel. The mind says, you are falling apart, must be true. Look how afraid you are. The mind says, you will always be like this. Must be true. Look how long this has lasted. No. Emotion is not evidence. Duration is not destiny. Repetition is not truth. Sit with that. How many verdicts have you accepted from a court that had no right to judge you? The inner courtroom survives through identification. The more you identify with every thought, the more personal every accusation feels. A thought says, you are not enough, and you do not hear it as a sound, you hear it as revelation. A thought says, something is wrong with you, and you do not hear it as fear, you hear it as discovery. That is how suffering deepens, not because a thought exists, but because you kneel before it. There is another layer. Many accusations in the mind are not even original. They are echoes, old voices from childhood, old criticism, old humiliation, old standards that were never yours to begin with. They survive because repetition gave them roots. Then you inherited them as if they were identity, but inherited thoughts are still thoughts. Old pain is still not law. You can respect what shaped you without obeying it forever. Stop again. Whose standards are still living in your head without your consent? Whose voice are you still calling your own? This is the point where strength becomes very quiet, not dramatic, not loud, quiet, because real strength in the mind often sounds like refusal. Refusal to keep pleading your case. Refusal to keep proving your goodness to an internal prosecutor. Refusal to keep treating every self-critical thought like a summons. That refusal is not denial, it is discernment. You are learning to separate signal from noise. A useful thought says, correct this mistake and move forward. A destructive thought says, this mistake defines you. A useful thought says, prepare well. A destructive thought says, never relax because disaster is coming. A useful thought points toward action. A destructive thought drags you into endless self-examination. The truth is, truth has a clean edge. Mental accusation usually does not. Truth may hurt, but it is specific. It leads somewhere. It allows movement. Mental accusation is sticky. It repeats. It spreads. It leaves you smaller and more entangled than before. So learn the difference. Then act on only what is clean. This takes courage, because the mind will try to shame you for stepping out of trial. It will say you are being careless. It will say you are avoiding responsibility. It will say you are becoming reckless. But if the courtroom never produced freedom, why keep returning to it? If the cross-examination never produced peace, why keep answering questions designed to trap you? You are allowed to leave. That sentence matters more than you think. You are allowed to leave a thought unresolved. You are allowed to leave a fear unanswered. You are allowed to leave a self-accusation unproven. You are allowed to walk out of the courtroom and back into your life. That does not mean you stop growing. It means growth finally becomes possible because your energy is no longer chained to inner prosecution. You can correct yourself without condemning yourself. You can notice a flaw without turning it into identity. You can make a mistake without building a home inside it. That is the turn. Not perfection, separation, not a better defense, a stronger exit. Because once you stop living on trial, the mind loses a major source of control, and in that space, a different kind of strength begins to rise, not reactive strength, disciplined strength, the kind that can see a thought, feel its charge, and still choose distance. That is where real control begins. Chapter 6. The Discipline of Stepping Back. Once you stop arguing with every thought, a new task appears, not glamorous, not dramatic, just essential. You must learn how to step back on purpose, not once in a while, not only when things get unbearable, consistently, quietly, with discipline, because distance does not happen by accident. If you have spent years merging with every thought, then stepping back is a skill, and skills are built through repetition, not mood. The first thing to understand is simple. Stepping back is not suppression. It is not pretending the thought is not there. It is not forcing calm. It is not replacing fear with fake confidence. It is seeing the thought clearly without stepping inside it. That may sound small. It is not. It changes the whole direction of your inner life. Stop for a second. Can you picture a thought without becoming the thought? Can you say, "There is anxiety," instead of saying, "This is me"? That shift is the foundation. It creates space between the observer and the noise. Instead of saying, "I am doomed," you notice that my mind is producing a doom story. Instead of saying, "I am not safe," you notice my mind sounding an alarm. Instead of saying, "I cannot handle this," you notice that my mind is predicting collapse. Do you feel the difference? The first sentence traps you inside the experience. The second sentence places you beside it. You are still aware, you are still honest, but you are no longer fused. The truth is, words shape posture. Change the wording, and you change the grip. This is where most people stop. They hear this idea, try it twice, and then quit because the anxiety is still there. But the goal was never instant comfort. The goal is separation. Comfort may come later. Power comes first, and power begins when you can say, "This thought is present, but I do not have to become its servant." Another way to step back is to label the pattern rather than chase the content. The mind says, "What if something goes wrong tomorrow?" You do not need to answer tomorrow. You can label the move: forecasting, catastrophe, seeking certainty, old fear. When you label the process, the content loses some of its spell. You stop treating each thought like a fresh emergency and start recognizing the old machinery behind it. That recognition is priceless. It saves energy. It breaks hypnosis. What pattern keeps appearing in your mind when you're wearing new clothes? How many different thoughts are really the same fear in disguise? Stepping back also means allowing the body to carry discomfort without demanding that the mind solve it. This is hard because anxiety often arrives in the body first: tight chest, fast breath, heavy stomach, restless limbs. The mind rushes in and says, "Explain this now, fix this now, solve this now." But sometimes the most disciplined response is to feel the sensation without building a story around it. You breathe, you notice, you stay, you let the wave move through. That is not passive, that is trained restraint. Most suffering grows when sensation meets interpretation. A tight chest becomes danger, a racing heart becomes doom. A moment of unease becomes proof that something is wrong. Remove the instant interpretation, and the sensation has room to pass without becoming a whole identity. The truth is, many anxious states last longer because you keep feeding them meaning. Step back from meaning, and the state often changes on its own. This does not mean you ignore real problems. It means you stop manufacturing them through overinterpretation. Real issues need action. Anxious noise demands reaction. Learn the difference, then give each its proper answer. A real issue says, "Pay the bill, make the call, prepare for the meeting." Anxious noise says, "Think about it for 3 hours and call that action." A real issue says, "Apologize for the mistake." Anxious noise says, "Relive the mistake until it becomes your identity." A real issue leads to movement. Anxious noise leads to more thought. That is why stepping back is not laziness, it is precision. Where in your life have you confused reaction with responsibility? Where have you mistaken mental panic for useful effort? You also need rituals, simple anchors, not because rituals are magic, because the mind responds to structure. When the voice gets loud, do not improvise every time. Have a clean sequence. Pause, exhale slowly, name the thought, label the pattern, relax the shoulders, return attention to what is in front of you. That sequence trains your nervous system and your attention at the same time. Do it often enough, and it becomes instinct. Then something powerful happens. Thoughts still appear, but they do not hit with the same force, not because life became safer, because your posture became stronger. The voice can still speak, but it no longer has direct access to your hands, your breath, your choices, your entire afternoon. That is control. Not the control of never feeling fear, the control not to surrender to fear automatically. And once you taste that kind of control, even briefly, you start to understand what mental freedom actually is. Not a silent mind all day, a mind that can make noise while you remain grounded, a mind that can throw up old scripts while you keep walking. That is discipline, that is practice, that is the beginning of clarity. And with clarity comes the next lesson. You do not only step back from thoughts, you also learn how to let them pass without building a home around them. Chapter 7. The Art of Letting Thought Pass. Distance is the first skill. Release is the second. Because you can step back from a thought and still secretly hold on to it. You can label it, recognize it, even laugh at it, and then spend the next hour carrying it in your pocket like a stone. So now the question changes. Not only can you see the thought, the deeper question is, can you let it move without making it your job? That is an art. Not because it is fancy, because it requires touch, too much force, and you start wrestling again. Too little awareness, and you drift back into fusion. The balance is clean attention without possession. Think about your last anxious thought. Did you observe it, or did you adopt it? Most people adopt thoughts instantly. They do not notice the handoff. A thought appears, and within seconds it becomes an agenda. Then the whole mind starts working for it, gathering evidence, building scenarios, preparing defense, rehearsing pain. The thought was brief, the attachment was long. The truth is, a thought passes faster when you stop feeding it tasks. That means no inner debate, no frantic correction, no silent panic, no instant search for certainty. You let the thought arrive as sound, as image, as old memory, as leftover fear. You notice the pull to chase it, and then you do not chase. This is where most people stop. They assume letting a thought pass means liking it or agreeing with it. It does not. It means refusing to turn it into a project. You can dislike a thought and still leave it alone. You can feel disturbed by a thought and still allow it to pass without trial. Think of clouds if you want. Think of leaves in water if you want. But do not let the image become soft in a weak way. This is not sleepy detachment. This is active non-cooperation. The mind offers noise. You decline the contract. That requires stamina, because some thoughts return hard, especially the ones tied to shame, fear, and old wounds. They know where to press. They know what gets your attention. They know which sentence can pull your body tight in a heartbeat. And when that happens, your job is not to prove strength through instant calm. Your job is to stay present without grabbing. That is real strength. A passing thought can still hurt. A passing thought can still scare you. But pain is not proof that you must hold it. There are practical ways to practice this. When a thought arrives, say softly inside, there is that thought. Not my thought, not my truth, not my command. Just there is that thought. That language matters. It keeps the observer awake. It keeps identity separate. Then bring attention to something real, the weight of your feet, the sound in the room, the temperature of the air, the task in front of you. Not as an escape, as reorientation. You are teaching attention where home is. Home is not inside every mental storm. Home is in awareness itself. When your mind gets loud, where does your attention go first? Toward reality or toward the story? Letting thoughts pass also means giving up the fantasy of perfect closure. This is hard. The mind wants a neat ending. It wants certainty. It wants the thought to leave and never return. It wants final proof that you are safe. But many thoughts do not leave on command. They fade when starved. They weaken when unimportant. They lose force when you stop kneeling. So stop waiting for the perfect feeling before you continue living. Act while uncertainty is still in the room. Speak while self-doubt still whispers. Rest while the mind still comments. Work while fear still predicts. This is where your life comes back. The truth is, you have delayed too much for the sake of thoughts that were never facts. You have paused your day for noise. You have given your peace to passing stories. You have treated every inner shadow like a prophecy that stops now. Not because the mind becomes pure, because your standards become stronger. A thought may enter, fine. A feeling may rise, fine. A memory may sting, fine. None of that means you must abandon yourself. Let it pass. That phrase is stronger than it sounds. Let it pass does not mean let it win. Let it pass means do not tie yourself to it. Do not follow it into 10 more rooms. Do not let it rewrite your posture. Do not let it steal your next choice. With enough practice, you start feeling the difference between a mind event and a life event. That difference is freedom. A mind event happens inside you. A life event happens in the world. Anxious people often treat mind events as life events. They react to thoughts as if reality already changed. But when you let thought pass, reality regains its proper size. You stop inflating inner weather into external law. And then something surprising happens. Silence starts visiting you in small, clean moments. Not because the mind stopped forever, because you stopped extending its visit. A thought comes, a thought goes, space remains, breath remains, presence remains. That space is not empty. It is power waiting to be used. And if you want to keep that power, you must learn something most people neglect. Silence is not a gift. It is a skill. Chapter 8. Silence is a skill. People speak about peace as if it arrives by luck, as if some minds were chosen for quiet and others for noise. That is comforting, but false. Silence inside the mind is trained. Not perfect silence, not permanent blankness, the kind of silence that matters. Space around thought, space before reaction, space between stimulus and choice. That space is a skill, and like any skill, it grows through practice that often feels unimpressive at first. Stop for a second. How often do you practice inner silence when nothing is wrong? Not when you are already drowning. Before that. Most people wait until anxiety is loud, then they try to become calm on command. That is like waiting until the fire starts to learn where the water is. You train silence in ordinary moments so it is available in difficult ones. You train it while washing dishes, while walking, while sitting in traffic, while waiting in line, while drinking water, while hearing the first rise of mental chatter and choosing not to follow it. This is where most people stop. They want silence only as emergency medicine. They do not respect it as daily discipline, so they never build the muscle. They keep hoping for rescue instead of training response. The truth is, attention behaves like a blade. Leave it dull, and it catches on everything. Sharpen it, and it cuts clean. Silence sharpens attention. It teaches you how to place your awareness where you choose, rather than where fear points. That is why small practices matter. 10 slow breaths, 60 seconds of noticing sound without commentary, 2 minutes of feeling your feet while the mind tries to pull you away. These acts look minor. They are not. They are repetitions of self-command. You are teaching the mind a new hierarchy. Thought is not first. Awareness is first. Sit with that. You do not need to destroy mental noise. You need to stop putting it in charge. Silence is also built through subtraction. Fewer unnecessary checks, fewer mental rehearsals, fewer private arguments, fewer panic searches for certainty, fewer moments where you feed discomfort with analysis. Every time you refuse a useless mental ritual, you make room. Every time you return to the present, rather than the spiral, you make room. Every time you let a thought pass without escort, you make room. And room matters. Because clarity needs room, choice needs room, truth needs room. A crowded mind mistakes movement for meaning. A quieter mind can finally see. That seeing changes how you live. You start noticing how many choices were once made by noise. You start to catch yourself explaining too much, apologizing too quickly, withdrawing too early, preparing too long, and hesitating too often. Not because those actions were always wrong, because they were often driven by an inner voice that had too much authority. When silence grows, authority shifts back to you. Stop again. What would change in your life if you were not constantly interrupted from the inside? What decision have you delayed because noise kept talking louder than truth? Silence also reveals discomfort you used to outrun. This is important. When the noise drops, you may feel sadness, loneliness, grief, anger, emptiness. Do not panic. That does not mean silence failed. It means the fog has lifted, and now you can see what has been waiting beneath. This is where discipline deepens. You do not run back to mental noise as a distraction. You stay present long enough to feel what is real without building 10 more stories around it. That is mature strength. Not the performance of calm, the capacity to remain with reality. The truth is, a quieter mind is not a weaker mind. It is a mind no longer wasting itself. It can still think deeply. It can still plan. It can still solve problems, but it does so with intention, not compulsion. Thought becomes a tool again, not a tyrant. That shift is everything, because once thought becomes a tool, you can pick it up and put it down. You can use it when needed and stop when the task is complete. You can think without being consumed. You can feel without being ruled. You can hear the inner narrator without mistaking it for the whole story. And something steady begins to form inside you. Not excitement, not endless peace, something better, reliability. The sense that even when the mind gets noisy, you know what to do. Pause, breathe, notice, step back, let pass, return. That rhythm becomes a private form of power. You stop fearing every rise of anxiety because you are no longer helpless before it. Silence, then, is not the absence of life. It is the clearing where life can finally be heard. It is where truth gets louder than panic. It is where your own deeper standards become visible. It is where identity starts to separate from habit. And once identity begins to separate from habit, the final change becomes possible. You stop asking how to manage anxious thoughts. You start asking who you are without obeying them. Chapter 9. The Identity Beyond the Mind. At some point, this work stops being about symptom control. It stops being about getting through the day with less panic. It stops being about surviving the next spiral. Those things matter, but eventually a deeper shift begins. You start realizing that your suffering was never only about anxious thoughts. It was also about the identity you built around them. You called yourself an overthinker. You called yourself sensitive. You called yourself broken. You called yourself intense. You called yourself the kind of person who cannot relax, cannot trust, cannot switch off, cannot handle uncertainty. You built a self-image out of repeated mental weather. Then you lived inside that image as if it were permanent, but it was never the whole truth. Stop for a second. Who are you when the anxious story is not speaking? Who remains when the old labels go quiet? The truth is, identity is shaped by repetition. What you hear often, you start to call yourself. What you practice often, you start to defend as personality. If you have spent years reacting to anxious thoughts, it makes sense that you began to think, this is just me. But habit is not essence. Conditioning is not destiny. A loud mind is not a final identity. This is where most people stop. They improve their coping, but they keep the same self-concept. They still see themselves as fragile. They still treat calm as temporary and fear as their natural home. They still speak about themselves with the language of defeat. So even when progress comes, they do not trust it. They expect collapse. They expect return. They expect old chaos, because old identity still owns the house. That has to change. You cannot keep building freedom on top of a self-image rooted in helplessness. You need a cleaner identity, not inflated, not false, accurate. You are the observer, not the storm. You are the chooser, not the thought. You are the witness, not the narrator. You are the mind's keeper, not its prisoner. Read that slowly in your own head. Feel what resists it. That resistance is old identity fighting for survival. Identity beyond the mind does not mean you no longer have thoughts. It means you stop defining yourself by every thought that appears. It means you stop saying, "I am anxious," as if anxiety is your deepest name. Instead, you see anxiety as a state that visits, not a throne that rules. You see fear as a signal that can rise, not a biography that explains you forever. This is powerful because identity directs action. If you think of yourself as someone ruled by thought, you will keep handing thought the steering wheel. If you think of yourself as someone who can observe, endure, and choose, your posture changes before life even tests you. You stand differently, you breathe differently, you answer differently, you move differently under pressure. That is not performance. That is alignment. Stop again. What sentence about yourself has kept you small for too long? What would happen if you stopped repeating it? There is discipline in identity, not because identity must be forced, because it must be guarded. Old labels will try to return. Old habits will whisper, "This calm is not real." You know who you really are. The mind will try to drag you back into familiar definitions. Be ready. Do not argue for weakness out of habit. Do not romanticize your old suffering. Do not keep telling the same story because it once fit. You are allowed to outgrow the description. In fact, you must. The truth is, many people stay anxious because anxiety became part of their internal status. It gave them a role. It gave them an explanation. It gave them a reason for caution, delay, withdrawal, over-preparation. Letting go of that role can feel like stepping into open ground. Good. Open ground is where new identity is built. What identity? Not a perfect identity, a disciplined one. You become someone who notices without drowning, someone who feels without collapsing, someone who thinks without worshipping thought, someone who hears fear without surrendering choice, someone who values truth over inner drama, someone who values silence over endless commentary. That person is not distant from you. That person is what remains when you stop confusing repetition with self. Let it settle. This is not about becoming someone else. It is about removing what never had the right to define you. And once that happens, your relationship with anxiety changes permanently. Not because anxiety never returns, because return no longer means defeat. A noisy day does not erase identity. A hard moment does not rewrite the deeper truth. You know who you are now, not by emotion, by practice, by posture, by repeated acts of inner leadership. That is the kind of identity anxiety fears most. Not the identity that never feels fear, the identity that no longer bows to it. And when that identity becomes stable, there is only one final step left. You stop living as someone managed by the mind and start living as someone who rules the space where the mind appears. Chapter 10. The End of Being Ruled. This is what it comes down to. Not a trick, not a slogan, not a temporary state you borrow on good days. A decision repeated until it becomes character. You will no longer let every thought govern your life. That is the end of being ruled. Not because the voice disappears forever. It may not. Not because fear never rises. It will. Not because uncertainty becomes comfortable every time. It will not. The end of being ruled happens when thoughts lose their title. They are no longer kings. They are no longer judges. They are no longer prophets. They are events in the mind. Nothing more unless you grant them more. Stop for a second. How much of your life changes the moment your thoughts lose authority? How much power returns to you? The truth is, freedom is less emotional than people expect. It is often quiet. It feels like pausing instead of panicking, like breathing instead of bracing, like hearing the old script and not turning toward it, like walking into the day without waiting for the mind to approve, like resting without solving every possible tomorrow, like making a choice while uncertainty still hums in the background. Freedom is not loud because it does not need to prove itself. This is where most people stop. They keep looking for a dramatic ending, a final breakthrough, a morning where the mind wakes up pure and peaceful forever. But permanent change rarely arrives as spectacle. It arrives as governance, as standards, as daily refusal to hand the throne back to noise. You have already seen the path. Thoughts are not facts. The narrator is not the main character. Mental noise is not identity. Anxiety lies by promising control through endless thought. The courtroom in your head has no right to sentence you. Distance is a skill. Release is a skill. Silence is a skill. Identity can be rebuilt on truth instead of fear. Now all that remains is loyalty to the practice, not sometimes, daily. Because the old mind will test you. It will return with familiar urgency. It will say, this time is different. This thought matters more. This fear deserves special treatment. This sensation means danger. This memory proves weakness. This uncertainty cannot be tolerated. Hear it, then stay anchored. Do not panic because the voice returned. Do not panic because your body tightened. Do not panic because old patterns knocked on the door. A knock is not an invasion. You still choose whether to open. Let that sit. Your mind can offer fear. You do not have to offer your life in return. There is a deep kind of power in becoming unpersuaded by your own panic. Not numb, not cold, unpersuaded. The thought says run. You ask if running serves truth. The thought says check again. You ask if checking serves peace. The thought says rehearse disaster. You ask if rehearsal serves action. That question changes everything. Does this serve truth? Does this serve life? Does this serve the person you are becoming? If not, you leave it alone. That is a rule. That is leadership. That is self-command. The truth is, the mind respects what you repeatedly refuse. If every fearful thought gets attention, the mind learns to keep producing them with urgency. If fearful thoughts are met with calm observation and no automatic obedience, the mind adapts, slowly, then deeply. It stops expecting instant surrender. It stops assuming every alarm will control the room. You train that outcome with consistency, not force. Stop again. What have you been teaching your mind by the way you respond to fear? What will you teach it now? This final shift is permanent, not because the mind becomes perfect, but because your relationship to imperfection changes forever. A bad day is just a bad day. A loud mind is just a loud mind. A surge of anxiety is just a surge. None of it has to become identity. None of it has to become prophecy. None of it has to become your future. You no longer ask, how do I never think anxious thoughts again? You ask, how do I remain myself when anxious thoughts appear? That is a stronger question, a more honest question, a permanent question, and the answer is already in your hands. You remain through awareness, through distance, through discipline, through silence, through choice, through truth, through repeated refusal to confuse thought with fact, noise with identity, fear with command. This is the end of being ruled, because you finally understand where rule belongs. Not in the voice, not in the panic, not in the endless commentary. Rule belongs to the part of you that can observe it all and still choose what happens next. That part of you is not weak. It is not broken. It is not late. It is not lost. It has been waiting for you to stop obeying the narrator and start living as the main character. A thought can speak without being obeyed. Fear can rise without becoming law. Silence is not empty. Silence is authority. The mind is loud when discipline is absent. You suffer longer when you call every feeling truth. Anxiety grows fast in the soil of unquestioned thought. Peace begins when the inner trial ends. The voice in your head is real. Its authority is optional. You do not need a perfect mind. You need a stronger position. Control is not force. Control is clean refusal. A passing thought does not deserve a permanent identity. The truth is, what you repeat becomes your reality. This is where most people stop. You do not have to. You are not the warning. You are the witness. You are not the storm. You are the ground beneath it. You are not healed by winning every argument in your head. You are freed by no longer needing to enter them. The quieter you become, the more clearly truth speaks. What you stop feeding will stop ruling you, and the life you want begins the moment your thoughts lose the throne.